We got Agatha all along, episode 8 and 9 finale.
Welcome back, everyone. It was Billy all along. This will
It
be my
was
full Agatha
Billy's
all along
hex
episode
the
8
whole
and
time,
episode
bruh.
9 finale video. They aired the episodes back to back because they wanted it to come out the week of Halloween because witchy series, supernatural things, Halloween, it all connects. There are a bunch of Easter eggs, a bunch of cameo scenes too. We actually
Infinity
finally did
Stones?
get a shot of Tommy. So for those of you that were expecting to see Tommy during the series, not quite the cameo
Barely.
scene that we were expecting, but we still did get a cameo scene. And I will explain where this is headed next, like what they're setting up at the end of the finale, and where things will pick up with Billy's story and Agatha's story. Marvel also just released a TV trailer for all the upcoming series that are coming out after
Oh my
Agatha
god,
through
bro, they
2025. I've already
cooking.
done the first big trailer video from that, so I'll link my Daredevil
I
Born
saw it,
Again
that shit
video
was
at
so
the end of
good,
this, and I'll do
especially
videos for the
Daredevil.
other trailers
Can't
over the
wait for
next
that.
couple of days. The rest of this year and all of next year is going to be stacked.
Oh
If you're brand new to
yeah.
the channel, be sure to subscribe
And that's
to
just
be
a
the first to get those
series.
episode
That's not even the
videos. There's a bunch
movies.
of stuff, so we'll just start at the beginning of episode 8 and work our way through shot by shot, talking about Easter eggs, WTF moments, big details, and foreshadowing through episode 9, the finale at the end of the video. Episode 8 was titled, Follow Me, My Friend, to Glory at the End, a reference to the final lines in the Ballad of the Witch's Road, which we learned was actually originally created by Agatha as a long con to help her steal the power from other witches. There was no road. Like I said, it was really Billy all along.
That's why she was surprised when it showed up.
Of the road itself. The road never existed. All the different titles to the episodes were taken from lines of the actual ballad itself. We also learned how it was created with Nicholas Scratch. Like Nicky Scratch's song served as the basis for the actual song as it evolved into the way that Agatha uses in present day. But notice they use a title from the end of the ballad for episode 8, and they jump to an earlier line in the ballad for the final episode.
I feel like this
most of that episode
should have been first, though.
to show how everything started with Nicholas Scratch, what really happened to him, how she
But I don't
created
know.
the ballad itself, how the whole lie of the Witch's Road itself was created. The episode begins with Rio, Death, claiming Alice's body after Agatha's trial in the 80s episode. Love the way they reveal this too, like they show you Alice's spirit first, like it looks normally, she's in her original clothes, but then she notices her desiccated corpse as it exists in the real world. Or technically it's in Billy's hex, but it's kind of in the real world, but it's really an alternate dimension of the hex. You also notice that Rio is wearing her traditional death regalia from the comics too, a little more comic book accurate.
Yeah, had the
Death
little
in the
skull
comics usually
face.
appears in
I
robes
like that.
this. That's what they're going for.
Little
Sometimes she
mouth.
appears with the skull visage like she does in this episode, in next week's episode. Part of the idea is that Death as a cosmic being can take any form that she likes. She just chooses to look like Rio, like Aubrey Plaza, because she happened to be using that appearance the first time she met Agatha, and she and Agatha fell in love when she was wearing Rio's face, so she just stays in Rio's form up to present day. This scene also confirms some of the early theories about why Rio wasn't around when Billy was using his power and throwing the
'Cause she's
witches
dead.
into the mud. Like, where's
He
Rio
was
when
waiting
this is
for
all
the
happening?
bodies.
Because she was busy claiming Alice's body. That's why she wasn't here. I love a lot of Rio's logic here when she's talking to the other characters that she shows up to claim, like, yep, it's time. It's your time, buddy. Like, you've done your thing. Time to go.
Time to
She
get
tells
out of
Alice,
here.
You're a protection witch. You protected people. You've done your job. Now it's time to go. The other interesting thing, too, is that notice that Alice is not surprised that Rio is dead at all. Just the fact that she's dead. Like, she's surprised by that, not the fact that she realizes Rio is dead. Like, oh, it's you. Okay, let's go. They walk through a portal into this green mist. Remember, Rio said she was the original Green Witch. They also explained that, too. The green is a reference back to her being the original Green Witch in the cycle of death and rebirth, the cycle of growth and decay, essentially. They do a slightly different spin on the Moon Knight thing where they clarify what happens after you die inside the MCU. So in the Moon Knight series, they basically just say that your consciousness goes to another dimension based on your belief system. So the idea is that Rio's taking Alice and the other witches that died to the afterlife, but she's taking them to another dimension based on the witch's belief system. So it's not the same place that like Mark Spector went to, because that was the Egyptian Duat, because he had the contract with Khonshu, the higher Egyptian deity. And because Rio is the cosmic entity death, she's super powerful, omnipresent. She's doing the same thing that she's doing for Alice here all over the universe, because so many people die across the universe minute to minute. And in each instance, she's taking the people that died, like wherever planet they are in the universe, to wherever afterlife, whichever
And does
alternate
she
dimension that they
eat off
believe
of
in
that?
based on their belief
Make her
system.
powerful? I don't
So it's
know.
not like she's taking all these different souls to the exact same place. But it's also a reminder that Rio
Or does
exists
she just guide
everywhere
them?
all at the same time. Just because we're seeing her in this episode is just a part of her consciousness that puts itself in this body, this form, so it can communicate with Billy and Agatha. The rest of her is still busy all over the universe claiming souls. There are a couple moments later in this episode, too, where they get into the weeds more on her power levels versus Billy's power levels in how she's not subject to what's happening inside his hex. Like his magic doesn't control her. They flash the title scene and then jump back to present day right after Lilia's trial, with Jen upset, Billy, Agatha making their way to the next trial, Billy's trial essentially. Notice the root system around the walls of Billy's hex are glowing green. It's meant to represent the whole Rio of it all, the green witch,
Yeah, she
the
was
whole cycle
taking
of
over
death
for
and
a little
rebirth.
minute.
When Lilia actually dies, the barrier to the Iron Maiden changes, it disappears. But you also remember that this is Billy's hex. It's operating based on a rule system that he unconsciously created. So even though Billy technically is controlling things, like he has absolute power inside here, he can do anything that he wants, he doesn't realize that he created it. So it's like Westview in Scarlet Witch's hex, where a lot of it
He
operated as
really
magic on
realized it at the
autopilot, and
end
she didn't have to finger puppet every single
when
little
he
thing.
left.
When Billy created it, he created the rule system for the way that it operates. And part of the idea is that when a trial is done, it would automatically just cut off that area of the road as they would move on to the next trial. Then we get a scene of Agatha being confronted by Rio, who's wearing a slightly less clothing than before. It's the same basic outfit that she had before, except for the green crown, denoting her as the original Green Witch. The pants are the same ones she wore before, like the shirt is the same. She just lost some of her clothes. The actual green crown is meant to mirror Billy's blue crown and Scarlet Witch's red crown, I think just marking her as crazy powerful. Like only people who are uber powerful in the MCU get to wear crowns like that. They talk about the original bargain that
Yeah, I want to
Agatha
see
made
her
with
at
her
full
to
power
walk the
though.
road with the Coven, get her
She
power
was
back,
going
Rio
too
getting
easy
her
on
bodies.
Agatha.
She kind of lies to Rio too because she plays it like she always planned for her Coven to die, which was kind of true at the beginning, but eventually over time she grew to love the other witches and care about them, especially Billy, which becomes a big point of contention between the two of them. They
He saw
confirm
him
my
as
theory that
her
Rio was
son,
after Billy this whole time
Nicholas
as well too,
Scratchy.
because she considers him an abomination against the natural order of things. She calls it the sacred order of life and death, basically. You remember Agatha told Billy, so you broke the rules, big deal. And Rio, as the cosmic entity Death, really cares about the cosmic rules of order. Rio almost says it out loud here, but Agatha stops her short where she's about to say that the road here does not exist, but like Agatha stops her before she finishes the sentence. Basically confirming that Billy created the Witch's Road,
Agatha
just
knew
like
the whole
Wanda
time.
created the Hex
He was
inside Westview,
just
operating in a
trying to see
similar
what's
type
up.
of. No one in history has had special treatment like Agatha because of their relationship. It's a little more context for what happened with Nicholas Scratch and how she basically gave him a longer lifespan. Like she extended his life when he was supposed to be stillborn and never having been born in the first place. She's basically
Hmm.
telling Agatha that if it would have been any other woman, the baby would have been claimed inside her, like the baby would never have been born. But Agatha is implying that it was actually a torture. Like, how dare you? What you did to me was terrible. Just because she grew to love Nicholas Scratch so much, the pain of losing him was even
And
greater
she
than
did it
had he
while she
never been
was
born.
sleeping. She didn't
When
even let
Rio
her
asks
know.
Agatha, why do you let other people believe the lies about you? And Agatha says, the truth is too awful. I think the idea is that she's talking about the whole con of the Witch's Road itself and what she's been doing over time. She's basically been conning other witches with the promise of the Witch's Road, using it to steal their power across centuries. Then we
Hmm.
find out that Billy apparently didn't know that
She's
Lilia
smart for
sacrificed
that though.
herself. Jen has to tell him. She also sets up the bigger explainer behind Rio and Death being the original Green Witch. The Green Craft is about the cycle of all living things. Death is the anchor of that cycle, like just one part of the cycle. The idea that Rio is a cosmic constant and it's why she's so powerful. The idea that you can't kill death, you can slow it down. You might be able to trap it for a little while, but you can't kill it. Later in the episode, Agatha basically tells Billy this, like, we can't
It's
fight
hard to
death, like
even
she's way
fight
too
it.
powerful. Agatha and Rio talk about Billy trying to use the road to get Tommy back. This is actually where they get into a little bit how powerful Billy actually is, basically hyping him up as
If he
becoming
could
more
do it,
powerful than
then
the Scarlet Witch
Scarlet Witch can do
eventually
it.
someday. This is also meant to be a callback to Tommy
The
Kaplan in the
turning into
comics,
another
aka the
body.
Wiccan character. The idea that eventually he will become the Demiurge, which is meant to be like the sentient biosphere of magical energy that all witches, like everyone, draws from inside the MCU. Sort of like Billy eventually becoming all of magic, controlling all of magic. But that's meant to be his eventual destiny. That's like a long ways off in his distant
He's
future.
still young. He gotta do
Rio
Young
basically explains
Avengers.
she's trying to stop Billy and claim his soul before she's unable to do so, before Billy can do a bunch of things that he's not supposed to be able to do,
Or
like
he turns
put Tommy
evil.
back in another body because he's so powerful. He can do that. She wants to claim Billy before he realizes that he can do that anytime he wants. That's the set at the end of the episode where Agatha basically helps him do that. When Agatha calls the road a waste of time, that's just a reference back to the road itself being fake. Like, there is no actual witch's road. This is all about Billy just realizing what his own power is and what he's able to do.
And she was
Ria also
saying like
confirms from
little
our
slick
theories that
stuff
Tommy's
too.
spirit had
The
not come
whole
back yet as of
episodes
this point in the episode. Keyword yet, because Billy literally brings his spirit
about the
back and
Witch's
puts it
Road.
inside Thomas Shepard's body at the end of the episode. All of Rio's comments are also meant to be a sly wink at Billy and Tommy in the comics and the way they came back in the Young Avengers stories through reincarnation. They talk about the idea that if he dies on the road or something happens to Billy, he'll be reincarnated and Rio won't be allowed to claim him anymore. Like, she'll lose the ability to actually claim him. So
Mm.
she's trying to get Billy before any of this happens. So the big challenge here is that Agatha tries to make it seem like she's bargained with Rio and she's going to trick Billy into turning himself over, but really this is just a con of Agatha's that she's playing on Rio because she's grown to care about Billy just like Nicholas Scratch, like she thinks of him as her surrogate son now. Really, it's just to set up her eventual sacrifice at the
He
end of the
taking
episode.
care of her more than
Notice the
Wanda
terms
was.
of her
Well,
deal too
Wanda's
when she's
not
still
around,
lying to
so
Rio. Like, the terms are that she can't come and
but it's
bother
a
her
crazy
anymore.
story.
Whereas previously across the centuries, Rio just seems like she would show up occasionally to hang out with Agatha every once in a while. This is Agatha sort of twisting the knife, basically telling your ex that you never want to see them again.
Mm.
Then there's actually a really cool meta magical moment for the way that reality works inside Billy's hex. It's a bit of a callback to WandaVision in Scarlet Witch's hex too, and the way that that worked. Takes
Yes.
her special knife, which I think is meant to be a version of Death's traditional scythe that it carries around in depictions, and rips through the wall, through the reality of Billy's hex
They could
road.
have
We
done
should call
like
it like Billy's
green light
hex,
coming out
as
of
if
it or
she's
something.
ripping through a painting, a facade, like a backdrop of a set, like a movie set where they're filming something. All because it's not meant to be a real road, and also, too, because a cosmic entity Death is so powerful, she can travel across universes. She could just rip a hole in reality if she wanted to. Just a reminder to how powerful she really is. She's not bound by Billy's hex. She can do anything she wants to in here, which is why she seemed like she was having so much fun when she showed
Mm.
up on the road. Like, oh, hey, how's it going, everybody? Just hanging out. Oh, this all looks cool. What's going on here? Then they continue down the road, which has led them back to the beginning, and they see the shoes that they took off when they first started. This also sets up the
The
twist at
end of
the
the
end where he's
road.
inside his room and notices the bronze shoes because Agatha jokes at him, "What are you
He
gonna
had to
do? You
put the
gonna
shoes
bronze
on.
these?" Which he actually did. Like, it's just another reference to him creating the hex out of his own mind without realizing it. The reason why Agatha gets so pissed here yelling at Billy is because she knows that he created it, but she hasn't told him. And part of the idea is that she's mad that he doesn't realize that he can control it, so she's just waiting for him to do something, allowing them to leave. Like,
She was
do
trying to
something so we
trigger
can get
him
out of here. But because she hasn't told him literally that
so
it
he
is a
can
hex that he
eventually
created,
do it.
he hasn't come to that conclusion yet. Billy then gets pissed off again, doesn't respect the road, and puts his shoes back on, which puts them into the final trial. Another reference like last week's episode where he said he wished for Lilia and Jen to be there and poof, they just showed up out of nowhere. It's just him controlling reality inside the hex the way that Scarlet Witch controlled reality inside the WandaVision hex. This trial is meant to be a representation of Agatha's basement, also another reference to the fact that they never actually went anywhere after episode 2. They were literally in Agatha's basement in the tunnels beneath Westview the whole time. Billy just
They ain't
filled the
even going
tunnels under
nowhere.
Westview with his hex. The reason why it's a morgue setting is a reference back to him coming back inside William Kaplan's body like he was dead and came back to life, also to foreshadow him doing the same thing for Tommy shortly after this. You could also look at it as another sly reference to what happens to Agatha too, because she dies, but then comes back as a ghost. Really love
I don't know
Agatha's
how
little
I
joke
feel
here
about
about
that
letting
little
Jen
ghost
keep
stuff.
her own struggle. Like, no, don't help her. She just enjoys watching Jen flail inside her
At
body
least the
bag there.
CGI or
When Jen
whatever it
says the
is.
lights in the room are meant to represent grow lights, like growing green things, it's meant to represent Billy's growth, also the idea of the Green Witch, Rio. The whole idea is that he's growing in his power and his understanding. Also, at the end of the episode, Jen claws her way out through the dirt, like she grows her way up
With her
out through the dirt.
powers.
You notice when they find their belongings, Billy's book has all the ink smudged and he can't read from it. That's just meant to foreshadow for the ending where he realizes the secret of figuring everything out, that he created his own hex was on the road. All the notes were in his book the whole time. All the clues were there with him. And it's also a reference to Lilia foreseeing this in his future and him needing to realize this. That's why she gave him the book in the first place, so that he would read it eventually and realize everything. Then Billy helps
Mm.
Jen come to a couple realizations. She never actually needed her magic, like she had this ability even without her magic. And it was actually Agatha who took her power back in the 1920s, who bound her in Boston. The way that Agatha explains it, she actually pulled the job for her peers who wanted her bound because, like, the other male people she worked with wanted her gone.
Yeah,
And
she didn't
Agatha
know who
helped
she
them
was,
to
so
save
shit.
herself. Like, it was either
Is it really
be
her
burned
fault?
by, like, either they come after her or she
I guess
helped
it
them
is.
find Jen. There are a couple of funny 1920s colloquialisms too. Like, she says she needed bank notes around that period because that's what they referred to as regular money back then. Jen then performs an unbinding ceremony with Agatha, getting her power back, and you notice during this, Agatha actually betrays her own emotions. She's actually sad about what she did to Jen. She feels sorry for what she did, and she's actually happy to see her get her power back. Most of the time, she pretends like she hates Jen and everyone else, when really that's not the case. That's just meant to be a lie that she wears on her face and hides behind. There are a couple of times in this episode and next week's episode where she relents and shows her true emotions, like she is honest with Billy about caring it, like, you remind me of my son. Normally, Agatha would never be that honest or that earnest with someone. It's just not in her nature.
She changed her
Jen gets her
ways
full power
after the
back,
whole
and the
road.
reason why she disappears and goes back to the real
All because of
world,
Billy.
clawing her way out of the dirt in Westview, is because Billy, unconsciously, when he created his hex, created the rule that when she got her power back, boom, she'd be kicked out, like she'd be done with the road. She didn't need it anymore. One of the funny things about all these twists, too, like when crazy things happen, is that because Agatha has already kind of figured out the secret of things, like, oh, this is Billy. It was Billy all along doing all these things, but he doesn't realize that he's doing it. She's just completely unsurprised by a couple twists. She's more curious about it, like Agatha going
That
into
she saw it
detective
worked
mode,
for
like she
the
was
other
in
girl,
episode one,
so
like,
she thought maybe she
interesting
could get
wrinkle in
Nicholas
this
Scratchy
interesting
back.
twist. But this is also why Agatha then tells Billy, after Jen takes off, why he can end this here right now, because Billy has the power to control his hex. She also wants to save Billy from Rio and help him find Tommy because she cares about both Billy and Tommy. All the talk about her trying to trick him into giving her his power is just a misdirect, because she's really trying to save Billy from Rio, and she's hoping that if she took some of his power, maybe he might eventually die too, causing him to be reincarnated, meaning that Rio would not be able to claim his body anymore, technically saving him from death. So even though they make it seem like
Hmm.
Agatha wants to take his power and like maybe she's gonna
She
walk
cut
off,
it off though.
leave him to death, that was never the case. Like, she was always planning on sacrificing herself. She performs another spell with him to help him find Tommy's spirit and reveals Rio's gambit that he can put Tommy in another body with his power anytime that he wants, because of Tommy's
You
spirit
could basically
basically
do
being
that to
inside his
anyone.
mind, his memories. This is basically her helping him do similar things to what Scarlet Witch did, but they didn't really get into this during WandaVision. Like, Agatha was never there talking her through creating other things or doing things like this. When he says he doesn't know how he came back himself in William Kaplan's body, Agatha says
The
you
soul
never do.
found the
That's also
body.
her talking about him creating his own hex, like, you didn't know how you created the hex. It's also a sly wink back to Scarlet Witch in WandaVision, because she also said during that series she didn't know how she created the hex, it just came out of her. There are a couple flashback scenes that they included from WandaVision's finale here. He remembers his final moments with Tommy. They replay Vision and Scarlet Witch's scenes from the finale when they were tucking them in for the last time. She mentions Scarlet Witch taking the hex down, and they play Scarlet Witch and Vision's final goodbye, where they say that they're eventually going to say hello again, talking about them eventually getting a reunion, which they will pay off during the Vision
With
series
White
in
Vision,
2026, and eventually Scarlet Witch coming back
most
in the
likely.
next Avengers movies like Avengers 5, and it sounds like eventually they
He's gonna
will
be the
do a
whole
Scarlet
family.
Witch movie after Secret Wars 2, where they'll
Ooh, I want to
culminate
see
this
that.
whole storyline.
Doom in her.
But this is basically
That's gonna be
Agatha talking
cold.
him through using his power to bring Tommy's soul back and stick it in Thomas Shepard's body, the same way that he did with his own soul. And they're using Billy's memories of Tommy to do this. This is part of his reality warping powers, like the whole reason why he was able to create a hex of his own in the first place, just like Scarlet Witch. It's the way that Scarlet Witch was also able to create Billy and Tommy in the first place
Out of
using her
nothing.
mind. She basically dreamt them up with her imagination, then gave birth to her imagination, making them real.
You need
Billy
to
is
find
kind of
him
doing the
real
same
soon.
thing with his memory of Tommy. She talks about finding Tommy's soul a body to inhabit, just like he did with William Kaplan's body. That's what she means when she says 120 empty bodies out there every minute, meaning like a bunch of people die every single minute just on planet Earth, not even talking about the rest of the universe. Then they actually flash really quickly
If
to
they
what it
put him
looked
in
like from
another
their
universe, it
perspective, from
would be
Billy and Tommy's
crazy.
perspective, what the hex looked like when it was coming down and came down. That was what those red flashes of light are meant to be. It was basically them existing inside pure chaos magic briefly. Billy then has a flash to a boy who's dying in an accident, drowning, with two other boys playing a prank on him going wrong. This is meant to be Thomas Shepard, like the original Thomas Shepard dying, leaving the empty body that he puts Tommy Maximoff's soul into, just like what happened with him in William Kaplan's body. So this is our Tommy cameo, although they haven't really cast an actor, like they'll recast somebody else to actually play him when he shows up on probably the Vision series, expecting him to show up during that. But the shoes here are meant to be a clever wink
I
at him
wouldn't be
having
mad
super
at it.
speed. So it's kind of a cameo scene, but not like a traditional cameo scene where you see his face full on, you see him running around using super speed powers. But then he finally does the deed. So if there was any confusion here, when Agatha and him are doing this, he actually brings Tommy back. It's just that he hasn't found him in the real world yet. Like, where is Tommy living now on planet
And
Earth?
they
We have
go
to
looking for
literally
him at
go
the
find
end.
him. In the comics, it was actually a little bit simpler. Thomas Shepard existed pretty close to where Billy Kaplan was when they both came back. Like, it wasn't vast differences apart. Like, they were actually pretty close to each other when they both got reincarnated. But this is also to explain why Scarlet Witch couldn't find Tommy, even though we know the sigil protected Billy. Like, the reason why Scarlet Witch couldn't detect Billy coming back in William Kaplan's body is because the sigil stopped her from doing that. But this is the other side of that coin. Like, why couldn't she sense Tommy coming
That
back?
she did all
Because it
that
hadn't
across the
happened yet.
multiverse for no
When he
reason.
finishes
Her
bringing
sons
Tommy
are there
Maximoff
now.
back, he's instantly transported topside out of his road hex in Westview. Agatha is left inside the trial and tells the story about Nicholas Scratch, the idea that Billy didn't kill original Tommy so that his brother Tommy could live. Sometimes boys die, there's nothing you can do about it, it's no one's fault, and it's not fair, to set up the whole reveal of what really happened to Nicholas Scratch and how he actually died. There was really no big twist. He was supposed to be stillborn just from natural causes. Like, it wasn't any kind of crazy magical twist behind why he died. That was probably one of the biggest surprises to me in the last couple of episodes, is there was no big explainer behind why Nicholas Scratch died. Like, no big magical or evil twist. Just the idea that
I
death
guess because
comes
she
for us all
created
at
life,
different points in our lives.
she wasn't
She
supposed to.
pulls out Nicholas Scratch's lock of hair in her brooch she's been keeping this whole time, and notices a dandelion there too. She says, death out of life is meant to be a metaphor for Billy coming back in William Kaplan's body, Tommy doing the same thing, basically turning something really sad into something positive and using it as a way to cast a spell to get herself out of the hex. The whole trick with her tear and the dandelion here and the earth growing to get her out is meant to be a practical magic kind of twist, which she jokes about later when Billy makes another hex to close the road hex itself and create the monument, like, practical magic. Agatha is casting an actual magical spell here. When she goes back topside, outside of Billy's hex, we find out that Westview has basically been encompassed by Rio's power. It's not an actual hex,
And
even though the
they just
townspeople
go
joke
and
about that,
look
like,
at
oh
it.
no, it's happened again, another hex. But I like the comp that it's Rio going full Wicked Witch, the way she's cackling on top of the roof, like the
I would
Wicked Witch
have
in the
moved
West.
out
She
after
uses
the first
Lilia's warning to
hex.
survive Rio's attack. When she calls you a coward, hit the
Especially
deck,
after
because
this.
when this
That's two in a
happens, it
row.
gives her a chance to save Billy. If she were to die here, then Rio would have just gone on to claim Billy on her own. Billy then shows up to save Agatha wearing his full Wiccan comic book costume. This is what it's going to look like in the MCU, but I'm sure he'll get some
Yeah.
costume upgrades. Like, every time a new movie comes along, everybody gets new
Yeah, he can't get
costumes.
the full suit
But it's
yet.
meant to be pretty close to his comic book costume, with the exception of the crown. Like, he's wearing the crown like Scarlet Witch's instead of the headband like the comics. This is also to show you that he is powerful enough to knock death aside for a second. Like I said, slow death, but not kill death. He's not that powerful yet. He juices Agatha up with his power a little, like she says, don't take it all, which is meant to parallel the WandaVision finale where they did something similar between Scarlet Witch and Agatha's powers going back and forth. She uses her power to reform her traditional outfit she used to wear, then notice she stops Billy from giving her more power. Like she cuts off the flow. Like, nope, no more.
You
Don't
say
want to kill
you'll
you, buddy.
live
Rio then sets
this
up the whole
time.
twist when she says that one of them has to come with her to set up Agatha's sacrifice, giving herself over to death. That's why she knocks Billy aside. Like, no, 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 it should be me. There are a couple quick fight scenes here too to show them double teaming death, but like I said, Agatha tells
They ain't
Billy
do too
there's
much to
no
her though.
way we're powerful enough to fight her. We can't stop this. She actually winds up using her Talk no Jutsu ability to save Billy, not actual magical power. I think the reason why Billy's finally able to break into Agatha's mind here during this moment, communicating with her, is because Agatha lets him into her mind, and previously she'd been using her power to block anyone from accessing her mind. Then he realizes
You
the
had a
truth of how
soft
Nicholas
spot for
Scratch
him
died to set up the big flashbacks
because
in
of what
episode
happened to
9,
her
and
son.
Agatha kisses Rio, which is basically her turning herself over in Billy's place. The reason why Agatha's body decays so fast, turning into dirt, the mushrooms, the purple flowers, is because she's so old. You remember, she's a couple hundred years old. Her body is aging rapidly to its actual age. Billy then takes her brooch, setting up the twist at the end where she starts to learn how to access different abilities as a ghost inside the MCU. There's a really cool look at Rio's deathly visage with the skull face from the
That's what I
comics, a
want to
little
see
more
right
comic book
there.
accurate, and she speaks to him telepathically, letting him go free. Like, you're free to go, kid. I'm not going to bother you. At least for now. Just don't die anytime soon and you won't see me. Just to be clear though, this is the last time we see Rio in present day, but Aubrey Plaza is supposed to come back in future Marvel movies and Marvel shows as the cosmic entity Death, but they didn't say which shows or which movies. We'll see
I
about
guess
that.
we'll find out.
This is not the last time that Death has shown up in a Marvel production. Then it turns back to normal day, regular Westview. He walks away from Agatha's, Ralph Boner's house, technically, past all the townspeople. Notice how flabbergasted they are, like, what just happened? When he comes back
Another
to his house
hex,
in
and
Eastview,
y'all
notice
still
he
living
changed
there.
back to his street
Real
clothes
smart.
before he walks inside and his parents see him, who say that he's been gone for only about 24 hours since the events of episode 1. Time moves a little differently inside hexes. They jump forward as he goes back into his room, and
It
you
was like
start
a whole
to see the
month,
Wizard of Oz ending of it all,
but
where he's
really
like, wait a
24
minute,
hours.
and you were here, and you were here, and you were here. Like, he starts noticing all the connections around his room, all the different posters, the
That's
Wizard of
when
Oz,
he
many,
realized
many Wizard of
he
Oz
made the
references
road.
inside the hex. You notice the Buffy once more with feeling poster in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. That's a reference back to the whole musical aspect of the show. Like, the show itself was kind of like a low-grade musical. And he finally comes to the realization that it was him this whole time. It was me all along. It was Billy all along. He created his own hex without realizing it, and there is no actual Witch's Road. He made it real. Just as Ghost Agatha shows up to surprise him. Boo, surprise! They cut to black and then move to episode 9, the finale, starting with the big flashback. The other big thing too, at the end of these credits, you also notice that there's a scene of Billy's room, his desk, with all of his research into the Witch's Road, when it flashes the title Agatha all along,
Crazy
to
for
reference
doing
the
all
fact that it
that.
was really Billy
I ain't
all
fucking with
along
that.
who did this. Then we moved to episode 9, the title was Maiden Mother Crone, a reference to a bunch of different things, a reference to one of the lines in the Ballad of the Witch's Road, to Agatha's brooch, that has the figure of the Maiden Mother and Crow, the triple goddess that she worshipped before she met Rio. It was actually her mother's brooch, technically.
And she
And it's
put
meant to
her
be a sly
son
wink to the
there in
origin
there.
of the ballad itself, that Nicholas Scratch created it with her,
Or
and she
he
used it
did it.
as
I
a
forgot
long
who did it.
con to take power from other witches. In the brooch, eventually, of the Maiden Mother and Crone, became the place where she keeps Nicholas Scratch's hair to memorialize him and remember him. All because this whole episode 2 is a big Nicholas Scratch flashback. The episode starts in the 1750s with her running through the woods. This is meant to be long after the Salem witch trials, long after she's killed her mother's coven, long after she's met Rio for the first time. They've been in a relationship for a long time, but she's about to give birth to Nicholas Scratch. Rio then shows up just as she's about to go into labor because Nikki was supposed to be stillborn as they reveal. Part of the idea is that in real world
He wasn't
history,
supposed to
mortality
be
rates back
alive.
during that
Well,
era were
be
crazy
born.
high. Both mothers and the children they were trying to give birth to back then had about a 50% chance that they would die. The ratio is a little bit better now, like modern medicine has helped with that a lot, but part of the idea is like back during a certain period, you had a pretty good chance that if you got pregnant, you weren't going to survive it.
Damn, what the
Notice
hell?
that
I didn't
Rio
know
shows
that.
up holding that really weird looking flower. Let me know in the comments if you think you know what type of flower this is. One of the big
Gotta
remaining questions here, though,
sneeze.
they never answer who Nicholas Scratch's father was or the circumstances that led to Agatha conceiving him. She and Rio seem like they
I
have an
think
open
I think she
relationship, so
said it
maybe
came
just
out of
over the
nothing.
years, when she hadn't seen Rio for a long time, she just got together with some dude, like had a really fun night and accidentally got pregnant. Rio says she can only give Agatha more time, extending Nicholas Scratch's lifespan without saying how long she'll allow him to live. This was the gift that she said that she never gave to anyone else later in present day. Like, I did for you what I never do for anybody else in history before. We learn how he got his name in the MCU. This is meant to be a small change from the comics. In the MCU, she names him Nicholas Scratch because she used no spells to help give birth to him or conceive him. He was made
Hmm.
from scratch, the old fashioned way that you create babies. In the comics, he's named Nicholas Scratch because that's meant to be one of the monikers that the devil goes by, so it's meant to be a clever wink at Agatha's darker, more supernatural side. She passes by a group of witches in the woods and they set
And
up a
they
twist
really
with
just let
Agatha
her
stealing the
in.
witch's power, like she's
Shaking my
continued to do
head.
this even though she's given
I
birth to
wouldn't have
Nicholas
let no
Scratch,
one
and
in.
then eventually
You
gets
could
him in
put the
on the
food
con
outside.
too. Little baby Nicholas
Eat
Scratch
it out
helping
there.
her kill witches all over the place, left and right. They jump forward in time 6 years. They're living in a town. They show a slightly older Nicholas Scratch, now much bigger part of the actual con that she's pulling, luring unsuspecting witches to take their power. Even though they have the goat with them here so that they can get the goat's milk, like they're using
You
it for
use
actual
him as a
sustenance, I
pawn.
think it's a clever wink at the goat being a connection to
And
the
he was like,
devil
why
and
we gotta
Nicholas
kill
Scratch's name
witches, bruh?
being another moniker for the devil's name. Then they explain how Agatha came up with the Ballad of the Witches Road. Nicholas Scratch technically came up with it and it just evolved into the version that you see her singing in present day. Down the road, down the witch's road. The line "I'll be there at the end" is also a reference to the end of the finale where Agatha says that she's not ready to move on because she's not ready to face Nicholas Scratch in the afterlife yet. Like, I can't see him yet. Keyword yet.
I mean,
She
you gotta
explains a little
face
bit
him
more of the
eventually.
technicalities of how her powers work, how she can do a lot of things, but she can't heal him or protect him from Rio, that is the thing that is
You
coming.
can't hide
There are a lot of
forever.
comps in previous episodes when she was thinking about Nikki, the crib, the Darkhold. You don't see the Darkhold ever during any of these flashback scenes, so that might have been a misdirect on the part of Jack Schaefer, the showrunner, just to mislead people and make you think that losing Nikki had something to do with her gaining the Darkhold, but they're saying that that is not the case. That had nothing to do with it. She probably gained the Darkhold at some later date, doing something completely different. They have a montage here of them workshopping the Ballad of the Witches Road song, just evolving over time. Also kind of looks like she's teaching him how to use magic, but it seems like he never had magic or never lived long enough to actually develop
Yeah, he'll
any
probably
skill.
have enough.
They
I
cut to a
mean,
little while later and they finish
learn how
making
to
the
use your
Ballad of the
magic.
Witches Road as it exists today, and Agatha started using it as the new con to lure unsuspecting witches to their deaths, spreading this false legend so that people will be entrapped by her. Pretty much what she did to the other witches in the coven during episode 2. But Nikki seems like he's decided he's had enough of the lies and Bale's mid-con running off. Seems like he's getting sicker too, getting closer to death, and
He
as
ain't
they go
wanna
to
do that
sleep,
no
we
more.
actually see Rio come back to claim him. So he basically dies in his sleep, RIP. Notice when she does come to claim him, she reminds him to kiss Agatha goodbye, like kiss your mother goodbye on her cheek as we walk off into the afterlife. So essentially, he has
I
been
would have
waiting in the
woke up. I don't know
afterlife
how
for
she didn't
Agatha
wake
to
up.
join him there for
All
hundreds
that
of years.
movement and
Gonna
light.
wait a little while longer because Agatha is going to be coming back during upcoming series and movies. Agatha wakes up, realizes what's happened, buries him, and then sings the song sadly, mourning him over his grave. This is meant to be the moment where she really started to hate Rio, that they reference in episode 1. Just as that's happening, she learns from a passing witch who's heard the ballad and believes the lie, and then kind of leans
And that's where it
into the
started it
actual
all.
long con of it all with a big
Dumbly.
montage of her taking
The
witch's
dummies
power across the ages.
let her take her
Basically,
power.
replaying a version of what we saw in episode 1
That
and episode
easy.
2. So, at least in those episodes, Agatha was lying to Billy when he came asking about the road, expecting to betray the other witches and take their power the whole time,
Yeah, he
all until
saved them
many
because he
episodes
came
later where
down in
she ought to
time.
care about the witches. The montage starts with them jumping forward to the 1800s then. These are probably the Daughters of Liberty who gave her the scars that she mentioned. This looks like sometime between the 1920s and the 1940s, just based on the way they're dressed, around the time she would have bound Jen. This seems very clearly like a 90s reference with the goth witches, her wearing the leather jacket. It seems like a reference to the Craft movie too, because there's a Craft poster inside Billy's room, and during that movie, the coven of witches all turn on each other like is happening right here. Then they jump to present day during the events of episode 2 to show those events from Agatha's perspective when she realizes what Billy has done, making the Witch's Road a real thing using his hex magic. Like, wait a
She
minute,
said,
he
wait,
actually did.
hold
He
up.
turned it into a
What
real
the
thing.
hell's going
This
on?
is meant to be the tell that she said that he had, that's just like his mother. Like, you have a tell, but she wouldn't say what it was. It's because she sensed that he created a hex just like Wanda did. Like,
I
oh, you
wonder why
did
she
just
didn't
like your
tell
mother. You're
anyone
so
though.
much like her. This wouldn't be nearly as dramatic if you weren't a Maximoff, because he literally creates his own movie LARP sort of situation of the road to live out this character development. Then we jump back to present day in his room with Ghost Agatha just messing with him. Notice she's got a new comic book suit. Her hair's all white. She looks a little
I
bit
don't know how I
older.
feel
This
about
is meant
that.
to be closer to her comic book look too. In the comics, she's
Well, I
portrayed as being a
guess
very old woman. She talks Billy through like a speed run version of the Charlie Day
if
meme
you
board
like
to
the
figure out
comments, I
what he's done
guess
creating the hex. But
it's
here's the
fine.
clarification. She actually says that his hex was way more meaningful than Wanda's hex in Westview.
Unlike your mother. Sorry. Wanda. You actually did something interesting with your power.
Like, way more people benefited from his hex than from Wanda's hex. Just because all the witches who did die, and including Jen who did not die, and Agatha herself who technically died, all got this great character development, whereas really WandaVision was more about Wanda's development. She tries to make him feel a little bit better about the other witches dying. Like, well, technically I killed Alice and Lilia sacrificed herself, so she chose to die, so don't feel that bad about it. And also,
Right.
you will eventually get used to killing other
He
witches.
did
Like,
it,
it's just
but
gonna
he
be a thing.
didn't.
Just teasing the idea that there's always the potential that Billy will go dark, just like Scarlet Witch went dark too. Love the Mrs. Davis
I
jokes
could
too.
see
They
that
kept this as like a
happening.
running gag where she kept forgetting that Mrs. Hart was actually named Mrs. Davis. Like, who? Oh, the gardening lady. Yeah, that person. Then we see Jen escaping through the ground and flies off just like Scarlet Witch did at the end of WandaVision. Like, literally, it's the same type of scene, which is flying off into the distance. Marvel hasn't said when Jen is coming back in the future. She's just out there for them to use. But fun connection, there's been talk about them doing a Midnight Suns movie team up of all the big supernatural characters. Jennifer's character in the comics was a big part of the Midnight Suns team ups. They go
Who
back to
knows?
Agatha's
Maybe
house
we'll
and see
get
that
it.
the
Maybe
hex
we
door
won't.
is still active. Anybody could literally just walk right in. He creates a new hex symbol, trying to use his magic and Agatha's brooch
To
to
close
send
it
her to
up.
the afterlife. Notice that he can also read his diary again now too, because they're back in the real world. He mentions Eternity, the cosmic entity. We saw that during Thor Love and Thunder. It's basically the sibling of the cosmic entity Death. All of the different cosmic entities are basically like part of the same family, essentially. A little joke about her relationship with Rio being super toxic, and he is definitely right about that. I think the idea here too is that his spell to banish her to the afterlife was technically working, but he relented, like he stopped after Agatha revealed that she was too afraid to face her son, Nicholas Scratch. At least yet, like she wasn't ready yet. So he could have continued banishing her, like it would have worked if he would have continued. She's then able to physically pick up her brooch and put it back on, even though she's a ghost. Like she says, she's slowly learning the rules of how being a ghost in the MCU works. That's also a bit of a clever wink at the
Billy kind of
writer
needs
saying
her
from
though
behind the camera,
to
we're also
guide
kind of figuring it out
guide
too
him
as we
because
go
he don't
along.
even know what he's
They do
doing.
that a lot on new Marvel
Only
movies
a
and
little
TV
bit.
shows. Like when something comes along, they create rules for something. Like on Moon Knight, another show will come along later and they'll sort of twist things or add new context to it or add new rules to the way that it works to make it more complicated. This is basically them saying they're just going to have fun with Agatha's character as a ghost in the MCU and just make stuff up as they go along. Her line about being a quick study, making a good team, a coven of two, becoming his guide, is more foreshadowing for Agatha coming back in the future of the MCU. Probably the next time that we see Billy come back, maybe during that new WandaVision spinoff that they refer to, maybe during the Scarlet Witch movie, maybe during some other supernatural related thing like Midnight Suns. It would be cool to see her show up during Midnight Suns. There's a lot of different places that you
Yeah, I
could use
like
her
Agatha,
character.
bro.
Billy then uses his
I
power
don't
to
know
close the hex
about
permanently,
them
creating a
killing her off,
memorial from
but
it
I don't
to
think
the
they
dead
should have.
witches and to Mrs. Davis, R.I.P. Then they walk out of the basement with the idea that they'll start looking for Tommy because he already put his spirit back in Thomas Shepard's body. They just need to physically locate where that body is. The only thing that they don't explain, like big WTF moment, if you're wondering, like big hanging plot threads, what happened to Senior Scratchy, Agatha's bunny? Literally, we saw him holding Senior Scratchy in episode 2 before he ran down into the hex, but then after that, we never saw Senior Scratchy again. Maybe one of the other townspeople adopted the bunny, like, oh, the bunny's here by itself, we better take care of it. Let me know in the comments what you think
They
happened to Senior
probably forgot
Scratchy.
all about it.
What they'll probably do for the Vision series in 2026 is that where we'll actually see Tommy come back, and they'll slowly adapt the Young Avengers comics to explain them all coming back, then the Children's Crusade. Scarlet Witch probably won't come back for real until Avengers 5 Doomsday, but that's really not that far off.
That's fine with
Like
me.
I said, there's supposed to be another
Long as we get
WandaVision
her
spinoff,
back.
but we don't know what the title of it is. It might be like a Wiccan and Speed TV show for just Billy and Tommy's adventures and more Young Avengers stuff. And supposedly, Jack Schaefer, the showrunner of WandaVision and Agatha all along, is supposed to be developing a Scarlet Witch movie that will take place after Avengers 6 Secret Wars.
Yes, sir.
I wouldn't
We're gonna
expect to
eat
hear
good.
too much about that until
Hopefully.
after the next couple of Avengers movies, because Marvel is so dead set on speed running the finish of this multiverse arc. Like, they want to get past all the multiverse stuff as fast as possible. Even Venom, in Venom The Last Stand, said, "I'm sick of this multiverse stuff." Deadpool and Venom, both sick of all the multiverse stuff. But there were 1,000 different
Because
Easter
you
eggs and
rushed it.
references in the last 2 episodes.
I
If
didn't
there are
do
any
it
that you
good.
spotted that I didn't talk about it in this video or my previous videos, just write them below in the comments. And what I'll do is there's like a bunch of other Marvel 2025 trailers
can't wait for
other
all
upcoming
those.
series that will happen later this year and early next year. I'll finish doing all those videos next. Everybody click here for my brand new Daredevil Born Again trailer, and click here for all my other
Yeah, make sure like, subscribe, comment, please.